Thank you. Good morning. As Atish said earlier, this is our coming out party for P2P. So could we pick a better place if you're going to have a party than here in New Orleans? Yeah, I think it's pretty apropos. Now I realize I'm also the last speaker, and I'm in the coveted spot before you go to lunch. So I'm going to try to move through these things quickly, and I'll go ahead and start plugging my afternoon session right now. So anything I don't cover, please come to the breakout session at 3:30 this afternoon when we talk more about P2P. The first thing, as Atish said also in his earlier address, more and more customers were coming to us saying we want one integrated source-to-pay platform, end-to-end data and visibility. And that was certainly a key driver behind Zycus coming to market with a P2P solution, which is new and very innovative. But frankly, the other driver was those first-generation solutions didn't always put on your jammies for you, as Debbie mentioned, even though that was what the business case said they would. So there are a number of things that we're addressing in the next generation, and that's how we've positioned our solution. So just to take us back a little bit in history, again, as Debbie said, 97, 98, thereabouts, you had the advent of companies like Commerce One and Ariba, at that time kind of synonymous with B2B e-commerce. So that was a big story they were selling. In reality, it was just e-procurement. So first generation of P2P, in fact, was e-procurement. So from a process scope standpoint, we're talking about really just requisitioning to order. Maybe requisitioning to order. Maybe the orders were still coming out fax and email and snail mail. So, as long as someone's having to rekey data on the other side, it's hard to make the argument that that's really automated. So a much more limited scope. So what's different today? Why are we bringing this solution to the market? The next generation is about full procure to pay. So end-to-end process enablement, not just the requisitioning phase. The other key difference here is the end user experience. So first generation was that heavy enterprise type of user interface and experience. And in some cases, let's face it, that's being charitable. There are probably still some green screen, mainframe-based requisitioning systems out there. You know who you are. I won't ask for a show of hands. But those things are out there. So what's driving the user expectation now, quite frankly, it's B2C. It's the experience that you have when you go to shop at Amazon, or if you want to book travel and you go to kayak.com, for example. So the bar has been, raising the bar again, has been ratcheted up for a consumer-like, more Amazon-like experience when it comes to procure to pay. The other key development here is in the first generation, I think buyers wanted control. They wanted to manage everything. So I wanted the data behind my firewall. I want to manage the catalog content that gets loaded there because I can't trust my suppliers. But what a lot of folks found out is that was very onerous from an overhead standpoint, managing. So the next generation is how do I make sure I've got all those controls that I need, but put the work back on the supplier side of the equation. So self-service management of the catalog content from a supplier standpoint. So first generation then, the other thing that came up earlier this morning is first generation P2P systems were driven by catalogs. So catalogs are great when you have standard widgets that you can reduce to an item, a part number, a description, a unit of measure. They don't change, they're commodity products. Problem is maybe that's 20%, 30% of the spend. So the challenge then becomes, what do I do when it's services or it's a more configurable product that I need that I can't just buy out of a catalog? And historically, that's been dealt with through free-form requisition process. So interesting story here. Zycus's first customer and my first employer, General Electric, was an early adopter of P2P using Oracle's iProcurement system. And as the story is told, when GE started to look at their spend data, I think the item that came up with that they had the most transactions and the most spend on was live animals and plants. So I can assure you GE has a lot of different businesses, I don't think we were buying a lot of plants or animals at the time. But what happened was when a user went to a free-form requisition, they're presented a drop-down menu, and the first category in the UNSPSC code happens to be that designation. So I got things to do. I'm going to pick the first one. I'm not scrolling through. And you get a very distorted picture, obviously, of your spend. So a unique innovation that we've addressed here is guided forms. So we've really repurposed our proprietary auto classification technology to make the free-form requisition process a guided form requisition process, not a blank slate. Take all the guesswork out for the end user and reduce the opportunities for non-compliance. Non-compliance in terms of buying from a non-approved vendor, but also a non-compliant process, transaction that gets coded incorrectly, wrong category, wrong GL code. All those things are what we're addressing here. And there's a big financial change. So the early first generation was multi-millions in upfront license fees, probably just as much to have a third-party consulting firm make it work for you. So I know we've got partners here in Capgemini. I'm not bashing management consulting firms by any stretch of the imagination. That was required to make those solutions work. And typically, those were behind the firewall perpetual licenses. So now what's changed? With a SaaS-based model, those things are much more manageable annual cost, a subscription, instead of paying a lot of money up front and hoping the benefits will flow from there. So a lot of key changes here in the next generation of P2P, and really bringing to the table those missed savings opportunities, that ROI gap, turning that into an ROI realization. I'll share with you at a high level just some of the metrics and how that works. Finally, going from a point solution, an island of automation, to a fully integrated source-to-pay suite. You've seen the Zycus capability there. And it's not just being able to check a box in each of those functional application areas. It's having real integration across those modules so that data flows through. So that you start with an opportunity that's identified in spend analysis, executed in a sourcing project, put it into a contract management, have that contract management, that contract, inform your procure-to-pay process. What are the SLAs? What are the payment terms? What's the pricing? What are the volume rebates? How all those things fit together is really what we're all about here. So, a little more data. Lots of numbers, lots of data, but I did come from GE, so I come by it honestly. You know, there is no more financially driven company, I'll promise you. And I think Bruce said it earlier, if you don't measure it, it doesn't count. I'm sure there's some greenbelt project going on at GE today to figure out, you know, what's the mean time per employee visit to the bathroom, and how do we improve the productivity on that business process, so we say. So the numbers piece comes into play here, and I am an alumnus of Aberdeen Group as well, so this is some Aberdeen data. And the key metric here, the key driver, is really compliance, bringing more spend under compliance. So I won't go through all this data with you, but I thought it's important to recognize, number one, these are people who have adopted e-procurement. And you've got a big spread between 36% of POs or spend compliant with existing contracts up to 86%, so 50% spread. So if you look at a picture like this and are looking in the mirror, you know, it always helps to be honest with yourself when you look in the mirror. Yeah, that hair is really gray. It's really starting to recede. It's true. The fact is, if you haven't implemented, you know, automation as yet in e-procurement system, it would probably be difficult to say I'm best in class. It might even be difficult to say I'm at the average stage. And I know that nobody likes to be called laggards, because we used to grade on this bell curve at Aberdeen, so nobody liked to be in the bottom 20% that was the laggards. But it gives you maybe a realistic assessment of where you are and where you can drive benefits. So a big part of this is, why do P2P now? If you weren't an early adopter, or maybe you did it early on and you didn't get the benefits. The reason to do it now is there's a lot of money on the table. So for every dollar, let's say you want to get towards this 86% that's best in class of compliance spend on contract, on average, for every dollar that you bring on contract, that's a 12% savings. So that's having people buy from your centrally negotiated agreement instead of going outside and doing their own thing. Some of you would probably say it's probably going to be more than 12%. I heard this morning in Bruce's talk say it was 38% on laptops, for example. So that's the big driver from a hard dollar cost savings. But there are numerous other benefits to be had here in terms of process cycle time reduction and per order processing cost reduction. So softer benefits to be sure, but nevertheless very real. It's a dividend that you can then spend somewhere else in your procurement operation by having people spend less time on these kinds of manual, labor-intensive processes. So Pierre's here from the Hackett Group, Pierre Mitchell, so I'm going to steal a little bit of his analysis as well and talk about why is there this big compliance gap that existed with first-generation P2P solutions and kind of set the stage for how we're uniquely addressing that challenge. So I think a number of you will recognize this particular situation where Pierre's research breaks down indirect spending between mainly product-related expenses, things like MRO and capital and telecom and so on, and then looks at more of the services-related costs. So if you look at the breakdown, almost half of the spend is in purely services categories. But I think what he's done here that's interesting is saying, even in those categories that are mainly product, like MRO, you've got facilities that has maintenance services or leased equipment, those kinds of things. So when you pull out the embedded services that are part of those product categories, you actually get to about 2/3 of total indirect spend on average that's in a services category, much of which will not fit neatly into an electronic product catalog. Hence the challenge for P2P. How do I get full spend coverage and do it through my P2P system to get compliant buying, meaning on contract, and a compliant process? So just looking at some rough numbers really quickly, what's the magnitude of savings opportunity here? If we took a company that had about, in this case, about $630 million in addressable P2P spend, and we want to move the needle on compliance. If they're an average performer, they're about 51%. Going from 51% to 75% is going to drive those hard dollar savings of about $15 million, along with a number of other benefits as we go through. So I just had this kind of discussion looking at the numbers with the CPO just last week. These are the kind of things that get the attention at the next level in the organization as well. What is the real ROI potential business benefit that says we ought to do P2P now? If we've been on the sidelines, it's time to get in. If we tried it before and it didn't work, it's time to figure it out this time because this is real money to be gained. So quickly here, the Zycus P2P solution has three major components. The e-procurement piece, or really the piece that's more visible to end users or requisitioners, starts with the shopping cart process, how I fill a shopping cart, either through search of catalogs or through creating an e-form for more of these services spend items, and then going through the full cycle of getting that requisition approved according to the appropriate approval levels and categories. And then, the next step is engaging the supply base. How do I make this easy for my suppliers to do business with me? So self-service tools on the supplier side to be able to provide their catalog data in any file formats. The ability to transact through e-commerce with both your more sophisticated suppliers, ones who can receive, for instance, an EDI or CXML purchase order, but at the mid-tier, also a portal so that they can come in with a browser and retrieve your PO, confirm the order, and do the turnaround or PO flip to send you an invoice back. and then the e-invoicing piece on the back end brings that whole loop full circle. So the key features here, we've really put an emphasis on usability. So that Amazon type of experience, that's one key factor in driving compliance, is that you make it easy to use. And guided buying, walking the user through that process, taking the guesswork out, as I'm going to show you here in a moment when I give you a sneak preview of what the application looks like. This is a SaaS solution. The benefits include rapid adoption, so speed to benefit, fast implementation, and this whole solution is leveraging that patented artificial intelligence-based classification to drive more compliance and more spend under management. So in thinking about what we're doing here, I was looking for kind of the right metaphor. So it's one of the unique facets of the P2P solutions is that whereas a lot of the rest of the solutions in the suite might be mainly within the procurement group as a user base with other stakeholders involved as well, P2P has the potential to engage every employee across the business. Could be an occasional shopper or an approver or a reviewer or what have you. So it has to be easy. It has to be intuitive to get that user adoption and get the compliance up. So Pierre, who's in our group here and will speak later, said it much more elegantly than I in kind of articulating what is this notion of a GPS, a guided procurement system or guided buying. So he talks about how the Zycus Auto Class Live Connect does the real-time auto classification and lets the user confirm first what is the appropriate spend category. So categorize my request just based on my search term. I don't have to have any previous knowledge or expertise in this area. And once we can do that, once we can categorize that user request, that search term appropriately, we can present to them a very specific, context-sensitive, a guided form. We'll call it a G form, but it's an electronic form that's already a template, and we've got about 500 of those that are already created, to walk the user through a series of specifications or attributes that are unique to that category. So you don't have to think about how do I specify what I want to buy. Also doesn't have to think about who is the appropriate vendor. The preferred vendor is suggested to the user. Picking the right category also means we know where to apply that to the general ledger, the right account code. We know what the right category-based workflow approval process is. So when Pierre talks about the right buy-pay channel, that means going through the right approval workflow, getting the three-way match done appropriately on the back end, and generating that to the end user. So to sum it up, he talks about this is not just a slick consumerized UI. It's this capability that makes the technology powerful because it drives compliance. At the same time, it's driving ease of use for the end user. So I want to give you a peek then. I said a sneak peek. And I'll start out just at a home page. First of all, this home page would be configurable to any of your businesses. It would have your logo, your color scheme, look and feel. And that's important from an adoption standpoint, that users, when they go to an application for the first time, it has the sense of home. It's familiar. This is my application. And users love to search. And I challenge you to find a bigger search bar than the one we put right here in the middle of this page. Right? That's a big honkin' search formed by Amazon and other B2C sites. So they're looking for this type of experience. And it may be a keyword search, but it may just be, I want to browse a category tree of the categories that matter to me. So it's just the ones that I've been authorized to see, the categories and the suppliers that are unique to me. And if I browse, I just kind of want to see within that category structure my own taxonomy. What are my choices? I go through and I pick. So I'm taking a common example here of laptops. I don't know, pretty soon maybe everybody will be buying tablets instead of laptops before we know it. But this is the common catalog search experience, again, that your users are expecting to find, where I can filter those results. I can compare side by side multiple supplier products. So I just select the ones I want to compare, do a side-by-side comparison, add it to my shopping cart, and off I go. So that's great. for that 20% or so of spend, that's the standard product that fits in the catalog. Now what do I do when I've got more of a service requisition? I've got a configurable kind of product, something that doesn't quite fit as neatly. So here I'm going to do a search for janitorial services. So I've got, first of all, the Web 2.0 kind of feature of the type ahead, where it's suggesting what are the right categories, and I know that I want cleaning and janitorial services, and I can pick it right there. So I've automatically got the right category, but I'm also presented with the right form, because I don't know everything about how I need to order janitorial services, but this is going to tell me, tell me what is it, commercial or residential, what is the office location, what is the frequency, what's the square footage, all those things that are needed to accurately specify that order with the least amount of rework on the back end. Or if these rates are contractually agreed, no work from procurement standpoint if you can ensure that this is a requisition that's going on contract and is properly specified through this guided form. Another quick example here, more of a configuration, is for business cards. So I'll just take my own example here where I click on the guided procurement. I say, guide me. I don't know what to do. I need to figure out how to do this. I'm presented with the right form that says, this is what you need to tell me, contact information, title, and I put in, because I wanted raised lettering. I said, give me raised lettering. It's got to be a nice card. And then I get to the end of the process, and I want to check out. So again, this is all driven by the consumer model. Folks are familiar with that shopping cart, that checkout model, and I don't want to have to key in as a user a lot of information here at checkout either. So this is pre-defaulting based on my user profile. What is the ship to? What is the bill to? What is the approval process that's appropriate to this category? And it's giving me a preview of what that approval process is. And the other benefit I get as a user is, in the past I've submitted a requisition, it goes into a black hole and I never know what the status is. So here I can track that status at any stage of the approval process and cycle as we go. Okay, I'm also going to plug this book. I put together what we're calling the P2P Playbook. And now I can actually say I wrote the book on e-procurement. So frankly, this is really just a common sense how-to guide. I heard the term come up earlier today in Bruce's talk about a playbook that was in a legal context, but it's the same idea here, is give me a series of checklists, some templates, some things to go through to put together my plan, the business case, the implementation plan, a strategy for P2P, a place to get started. So I encourage you, we've got those books here to take a look at those and see if that'll be helpful to you. I also would encourage you to come join the session for this afternoon. And the last pitch I'll talk about is for those of you who are contemplating a procure-to-pay initiative. The other key change as you go from Gen 1 to Gen 2 is the good news is it's a lot easier to get started with these things. So it's with a SaaS solution, you don't have to make a big bet up front. A great way to start is a pilot, limited scope, a subset of users. Prove the business case before rolling it out broadly across the organization, because, as I mentioned, P2P, probably uniquely, I really can't think of any other application across the enterprise that has as big a potential footprint. If you think about every employee in your business could be a shopper, could interact with this system. So again, the premium is on ease of use. The last piece I'll finish up with today then is our strategic partner program. Because we brought this new innovation, this next generation P2P solution to the market, we're engaging very closely with a limited group of customers who will help drive that product roadmap, give us direct input and feedback on the product direction, help us really tailor it to your unique needs. And we envision a very close working relationship and a number of benefits from participating in that, including some pretty significant financial benefits to being one of the first adopters for a truly innovative P2P solution in the space.